Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, I am excited, and let me tell you why. We get tons of stories of individuals overcoming, because that's what this show is about. It's about that beast mindset, and we all have it within us. And my job is to bring the stories of how these individuals have done this, because what we think might be an easy walk may not be the same for somebody else. Yesterday, the last couple of days, I had the pleasure of doing a pre-interview with the young lady that's about to come and share her story. And believe me, when people tell me their stories, I'd be like, oh my God. The first thing is like, how did you do that? How could this have happened? How did you get out of that? And it goes on and on. The beautiful part about this particular story, it starts out with a judgment, because that's usually what it goes down. Our lives start with is a judgment call from somebody, family, friend, whatever. Eating disorders, but more importantly, a journey of this is the key, wanting to create life. You don't hear that much on this show. Somebody wanted to bring life into a world of sometimes beautiful, sometimes hard, but more importantly, a responsibility. And she was wanting to take on all this. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show the beautiful Julie Holland. Welcome to the show, baby girl.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I'm really excited. I mean, your story just goes on and on and on, and it ends beautifully. So I'm not going to tell it, but tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into the complete journey of your life.
Just the highlights, grew up military. I'm a military brat. So those in your audience who are military brats, you have an understanding of who I am right off the bat. My dad was military in every sense of the word. I was the baby of the family. I have an older sister, and grew up in a household with a mom and dad who believed in providing for us, but also there was turmoil. My dad was very driven. After he left the military, he became a car salesman, then a car dealer. I get my drive to be successful definitely from both my dad and my mom, but just from different ways. My mom, my dad was one of 9 children of a Baptist preacher,
Wait a minute.
and
How
he
many
was
children?
9
Wow.
children, and
Wow.
and they're both from Florida, and both grew up relatively poor. My mom probably from a poorer family than my dad. And my mom was much more of what I would call the quiet giant. My
Mhm.
dad, his voice could be very loud and he took up a lot of space, but my mom, she said a lot without ever using her words. But, as a child, I grew up in a home that was very, though very, very loving. It was fear-based. My dad
Oh.
was very strict, and my mom did what my dad told her to do. There was a lot of trauma in my household. There was what I call my dad was a rageaholic. He wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't a drug addict. He always provided for our family, but the rage he had could be just, turn on you in a heartbeat. And anyone who knew my dad in the small town where I grew up in Georgia, anyone who knew my dad knew that about my dad.
Wait a minute. Stop the car. Stop the car.
Uh-huh.
Georgia.
Yes.
What part of the military? What station was your dad at?
My dad was at Fort Benning, so I was born in Fort Benning.
So
Um,
you know my hometown, which is Albany, Georgia. Then.
Albany, and my mom and dad, we lived in Albany after I was born. We did move to North Carolina just very briefly, to
Mhm.
Fort Bragg, and then we moved to Albany where my dad was the Army recruiter there.
Oh, okay.
And my earliest memory was sitting on the edge of our driveway and eating cereal out of a box and my mom and dad inside fighting.
When you say your
I
earliest memory, Julie,
mhm.
not to cut you off, what do you recall about what age that was?
I had to have been around 2 or 3 years old.
That's pretty crazy to remember that at 2 years old.
I
I'm gonna go
know.
back a little. Let's go back a notch. You mentioned individuals that knew your dad and stuff, and I'm not a therapist. You are. I'm not gonna play a therapist, but it appears that a lot of these things that our parents have may have stemmed from their likelihood. What do you know about your parents, your grandparents on your father's and
Mhm.
your mom's side?
So my grandfather on my dad's side, my paternal grandfather, he passed away when I was 2 weeks old. So
Okay,
I never really knew him. He knew that my mom and dad had another girl, so he knew he had another granddaughter.
right,
My grandma Dryden, she was tough. I mean, had to be with those 9 kids, right?
right,
And
right.
it's so funny. I have this memory of my grandmother coming to stay with us, and I was a majorette in high school, and I was outside practicing, and she was inside shelling peas. And I remember she came to the door and she's like, "Well, do you think it's your birthday or something?" And I'm like, ran back inside and started shelling peas again. I
Right,
mean,
right.
my grandmother was one that you listened to. She could be very stern. She had what we all called the Dryden look, which apparently I have sometime now. Dryden was my maiden name. And so there was a look that everyone knows that that was the Grandma Dryden look.
So
But
you didn't know too much about your grandparents, but you
mm-mm,
focused on something that um really has me kind of shaking in my boots here. You mentioned fear based,
mm,
and at 2 years old, and now you're realizing that's a powerful word to bring back to your life
mhm.
at the age of 2. So explain that a little bit more because you did say fear based.
Right, I did, and just to bring in just quickly about my mom's family. My mom grew up working in tobacco fields, and so my grandfather drove a Texaco truck. My grandmother was at home, but it was a different period of time when my mom grew up. And as I mentioned, she did grow up very poor, and I believe my mom grew up very fear based as well.
Did your
She
mom ever share with you what it was like? This is the
oh,
first time I even heard
absolutely.
somebody saying that their parents or their ancestors picked tobacco. Did she ever share what that was like?
Oh, horrible, horrible. Hot, they didn't have shoes. I mean, they lived in North Florida, Live Oak, Florida. So, working out in those fields was some very, very hard work, and she did it from a young age. My grandfather started working out in the tobacco fields when he was 5 years old, and actually started smoking, rolling tobacco, rolling cigarettes with his brother in the
Wow.
tobacco fields, and he smoked until the day he died. But I think my mom was that same way, even though she was very shy.
Right.
She was used to a very strong paternal presence,
Mhm.
so that wasn't something that I think that my mom, that was such a norm for her. So growing up, many times I did things not because I thought it was right or wrong, but because I was afraid of getting in trouble.
Mhm.
And to me, getting in trouble was the worst thing because getting in trouble meant a spanking. I mean, I grew up in the days of, yes, my dad had a belt or 2 or 3, and, it's just what happened. I remember we also had, I don't know if you know what a polo paddle is? It's like a paddle
Yes.
that has a string with a little ball on
You're
the
telling
end.
our age.
Oh, I know, and I gotta tell you, to this day, I don't like polo paddles because that polo paddle was kept in a drawer, and we knew if we were in trouble, that
They
that
got
would
pulled
come
out.
out.
Yeah, yeah.
It did, but I just remember growing up feeling that, performing in a positive manner was very important. How you perform, seeking approval, um, seeking external validation, always having to do things perfectly. I mean, just to tell you a story, Andre, this is to this day. So my dad's a car guy. He was. My dad passed away 5 years ago, January 27th, and so, um, but cars, he loved cars from the day, his whole life. I have all these old pictures of my dad with cars. Well, I love cars too. I mean, my very first car was a '72, Mach 1 Mustang,
Oh, I'm
and
scared of you.
I know, I know. I love cars and I like fast cars. And so, but Saturdays, in most people's lives, Saturdays are a time of relaxation. You sleep in late, you relax more, it's your day off. Not at our house. Saturdays were when we got up early, we washed cars, we worked in the garden. Sometimes we'd go fishing after we got through, working in
Right.
the garden. My mom and dad had a pond and we would go fishing or we would go to the creek fishing. But, so I grew up with a love of fishing, but because that was a time when we would relax more. But I remember washing it to this day, I hate washing a car because my dad wanted it done perfectly. Like there
Really?
could not be a spot left on that car. And I started washing cars as a very young, I mean, I was probably 5 or 6 outside washing cars. The this is where I say that we can all get caught up in what happened to us and how
Right.
bad that was. And you can hear this story and say, oh, how awful. What I really believe somewhere in my life, I learned that you can allow those things to really weigh you down
Mhm,
and keep you from being everything you can be, or
mhm.
you can look at it as a lesson learned. And for me, I truly feel that my work ethic came from my parents. I watched both of my parents work very hard. They were very honest people. Integrity was very important. Doing what you say and say what you mean and
Right,
mean what you say was very important. And so on the outside, our family looked very good. On the
right.
outside, we had this perfect all American family. On the inside, there was a lot of rage and a lot of fighting. And my dad and my sister were both very hard headed. They would hit up against one another. My mom would just get quiet. And I was the one who had to be the peacemaker. I learned
What were you more afraid of in your household growing up, and why?
someone getting hurt. My mom was my rock, and, I was afraid my dad would hurt her. I think I was afraid.
Did you ever figure out that I'm sorry about the passing of your dad. I know it's the anniversary of the 27th
Mhm.
just other day, but, what were some of the things that was triggering your dad? I realize he was in the military, but did anybody, you're a therapist, anybody sit back now and look at this and say, what was he dealing with?
I mean, I truly believe my dad was a narcissist. I believe that my dad grew up in a household. I mean, I remember a story he told me, and I think this is where I get my ability to have compassion even when people behave poorly, because I know the good man that my dad was. I mean, my dad was notorious for spanking us and afterwards crying and saying, I'm sorry, I'm a really bad dad. And we would be there, no, dad, you're a good dad. It was always up to us then. But I
Mhm.
think some of the things that triggered him were when things weren't done right. I think my dad was under a lot of stress. And when he was under stress, he just took it out on those around him. My dad liked order. I mean, he did come from the military. He retired after 20 years. He liked things very orderly. So if
He
he
was a
ever came
structural
home,
guy.
yeah, he was very much about structure. And if he ever came home and dinner wasn't ready or we were being loud, that was something I noticed my dad didn't like. Like we traveled a lot because we lived in Georgia, but all of our family lived in Florida.
Mhm.
And so we would travel to see our family, our grandparents, especially my mom's side. And I remember we would be laughing and joking, but I guess my sister and I would cross that line and he would get angry and just haul off and, sit back and shut up. And so I mean, honestly, Andre, I learned at a very early age to pay attention to people's to pay attention to the temperature in the room
Mhm.
and not pay as much attention to people's words as I did their behaviors. It's probably one thing that's made me be successful as an eating disorder therapist now because, I am more intuitive. I'm able to kind of see when things are happening in a room that without words even being said.
You
But on the
mentioned
flip side,
something.
yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned something real quick. You are a therapist that deals with eating disorders. So let's go
Yes.
back for a second before we come out of your childhood into your adulthood and relationship part. I mentioned what were some of the things that petrified you coming home,
Mm.
but if you mentioned that you suffered eating disorder, was this why was this brought up? Was he did he focus on your weight a lot or something going
Well,
growing up?
it's really ironic. My dad went to Vietnam when I was 7 years old. My mom was a single parent. I remember my mom being very happy during that time. I mean, there wasn't fighting. I remember Christmas was amazing. But my mom cooked all the time. In order to deal with my dad's absence and be the good enough parent, I realized that's what she did. She was always cooking.
Mhm,
Well, I was at the other end of that. I was always eating. In the absence of not having my dad there, I filled that void with food. And so by the time my dad returned from Vietnam, a couple of years later, a year and a half later, I had more than doubled my weight. And my dad gets off the plane. At that time, you could meet, people out on the tarmac, and we were
mhm,
at Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia, and we go out on the tarmac to see my dad, and he ran up to me and he picks me up and he goes, "Well, will you look at my little tank?" And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, he thinks I'm ugly." But no, in my dad's mind, a tank was a great thing. It had saved his life, over
mhm,
in Vietnam. And so, but I had in fact turned to food, and my mom turned to feeding us. Years later, I did realize though that my dad liked all of us looking a certain way. My mom, my mom passed away last year, and at 85 years old, my mom was still very, very focused on weight and how other people looked and not being fat. That was
mhm,
something that my mom, even at 85 years old, talked about often. And so, eating disorders, it's no wonder that things happen. I mean, it's no wonder, when it's in the household, but eating disorders are biopsychosocial. So I had that genetic component. There was addiction in my dad's side of the family and my mom's. There was alcoholism. So I already had like the breeding ground, the genetics.
mhm,
And then I had the perfectionism that was really drilled into me. And then society. I mean, I will tell you, once I had gained all that weight with when my dad was gone, well, then when I was going into junior high school, I lost a significant amount of weight over the summer.
mhm,
I came back to school and had a boyfriend for the first time. Everyone was telling me how beautiful I looked. I was in beauty contest. I won beauty contest, and everyone was talking about how much weight I had lost. And I started equating you know, that in order to be popular, in order to be, validated, getting that external
mhm,
validation, that you need to look a certain way. And the truth was, my mom and dad both validated how we looked.
mhm,
There was a lot, our beautiful daughters, there was a lot put on appearance. And quite honestly, not a lot on education. I mean,
really?
my dad expected us while we were in high school to make all A's, but no one in my family went to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college, in my immediate family to go to college. And it wasn't something that was, "Oh, yes, we want you to go to college." It was, "Oh, Julie's gonna go to college because
It
that's
was
how she
already
thinks."
enforced on you,
Right.
basically.
Mm-mm.
When did
Mm.
you realize that you clinically had a eating disorder or you were suffering with this?
Yeah, it was years later. I mean, I ironically, I started working in mental health when I was 17 years old. I worked at the local mental health center, initially just assisting the center director, and then I stayed working in mental health and eventually got my degree.
Mhm.
But I had a boss who one day said something about my eating disorder, and this was again, I'm going to age myself. This is during the Karen Carpenter days.
Okay.
And, Karen Carpenter had died from anorexia. And in small town America, I mean, there were so many people with eating disorders across the country, but in small town America, I mean, this was our way of life. I
Mhm.
mean, there was a lot of attention put on beauty and body size, and people were always dieting and people were taking diet pills. I mean, doctors would give you the diet pills, to look, and it's no different really, I guess, than what we're going through right now,
Right.
with the shots that people are taking.
Right.
It's our world never seems to change as much as we evolve,
Did
that
you
we
do
still go
that as
back to
well?
that.
That you go through the pills, the quick
Oh yeah,
fasts, the
I took black beauties, doctors. I was put on my first diet pill when I was in the 4th grade, and a military doctor put me on diet pills, said I was obese. And I was. I mean, I was my weight, I think I was 4'8" and probably weighed 190 pounds, close to 200 pounds. And so, but rather than teaching me about body movement and nutrition, gave me a pill to make me lose weight, and I did. I did lose the weight, and that's when I became anorexic. Got a lot of kudos for that, but the truth is I like food, so I started the whole binge eating, the bulimia cycle where I'd starve and binge, starve and binge. I would
how
purge
how does
through
this
laxatives, diet pills, whatever I could take.
how does this affect you later in life? Because the other part of your journey,
Mhm.
because I'm trying to get all this in a little bit of time, because your story is so
Right.
beautiful. Once again, my apologies for the loss of your father and your mom. But
Thank you.
you're going into an adult, you're taking all this medication, you're trying to fit in, but you one thing I can honestly say that I like, you did admit that you like food. And if you
Mhm.
had the right tools, it may not have been the same, but going to the part where the most beautiful part of your life, you want to have a child. Take the
Yes.
viewers down that part of
Yes.
your life.
So, as young as I can remember, I always dreamt of having a baby. And what I didn't realize is what I was doing to my body with an eating disorder, and what many people don't understand actually impacted my ability to have a baby.
Meaning
I,
what? Did it change
um,
your hormone structures with the
I
stress?
mean, I went years without a period. I mean, I was being very destructive to my body.
Okay.
And so when it came time that I was trying to get pregnant, I couldn't. And, I had never even considered the fact that I wouldn't be able to have a baby once I wanted to try. But I actually went through 18 years of trying to have a baby, and finally, after 2 cycles of in vitro, I did have a baby, but ironically, at age 40. But, the truth is, Andre, I am so grateful because when you talk about, your show, when you talk about that beast, I mean, I grew up with these things that, yes, it's what happened to me, but
Mhm.
it's not who I am. And what I
Okay.
realized was once I had my daughter, I knew I wanted to be the very best mom I could be. I wanted to learn from things I went through because what I believe is my parents were the very best parents they could be.
Right.
They were taught from their parents. And
Mhm.
so I think this is where I look at, I mean, I've been through lots of therapy. I've been through lots of failed relationships, loss of jobs, um, grief and pain, losing in this past year. I lost a job. I lost my soul animal pug, and I lost my mom,
Yeah.
all like within 4 months of one another. But what I realized, what is it they say, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
Right.
I used to hate that, but what I realized is it's not necessarily what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but if you allow yourself to really learn
Mhm.
from what's happening to you and not feel like that you can never overcome it, it really can be lessons. And I think that's why for me, I truly believe that the things that have happened to me in my life have made me a better person today. Even the things that happened in this past year,
Right.
I can look at, oh, I lost my job. How terrible of them,
Mhm.
to let me go. And then I realize, the whole let them theory, let
Right.
them, it's their company. Let them do this. And then what
Right.
does that mean for me? You
And then
know,
you gotta figure out now how to set maybe new goals, take
mhm,
accountability, look at
mhm.
life in a new redirect.
Absolutely. That's so true. And what I realized too is, yes, people hear me talk about my daughter a lot. My daughter is now 22 years old. But one thing that I always keep in my mind, and I think that this is where people always have to find what gives them that glimmer, what gives them that hope, that thing to hold on to. And for me, mine was my dream of having a child and specifically, having my daughter. And I can say that, so every decision I make, every single thing I do, I ask myself, is this decision I'm making, is this a decision I would want my daughter to make? Is
Mhm.
this how I want to be showing up for my daughter? Because sometimes there are times it's hard to show up for yourself, you
Right,
know?
right,
It is. And so it would be really easy to just give up and go, "Poor me." But then I look at that, how does that look to my daughter? How does that look to these eating disorder clients who I've worked
right,
with over the years, who I've seen them overcome challenges? And so it's where I think I've used my external validation
right.
and looking at what other people think to sometimes get me to where I need to be doing what's best for me, if that
Ju
makes sense. Does
Yeah,
that yeah.
yeah. Julie, you mentioned something, and 40 years old, that's not old by any means.
It's old
So
to have a baby.
you wanted to bring a child into this world. You recognized the obstacles that were in your way, basically the eating disorder. But let's move to, before we close out, into a beautiful, more, even more beautiful side of your story. What was it like to finally get that nod at that you're going to be a mom? And then it's a two-part question. Knowing that you're now a mom, your daughter, you're a mother, your daughter's in her, on her 20 years old. What do you tell your daughter now about you and what you came, and how to be a strong woman like you are?
Mhm. So, first of all, I did have my daughter at 40, and I had her while we were living out of the country. I lived in Bermuda at the time. And so having my daughter, first of all, it was like a Christmas gift. I think I said to you when we talked earlier, it felt like Christmas every day. The day that I got the news that I was pregnant was truly the happiest day of my life.
Right.
Outside of the day they put her in my arms, that was the happiest day of my life. And I'll remember that day forever. I remember her looking at me and kind of that scowl, the Grandma Dryden look, we called it,
Hmm.
and thinking, "Oh my goodness, she's here. Now what?" And then I remember just making her a promise that I would try to be the very best I could every day, that I knew I would fail her, that there would be times I would fail her, but but I would do my best to own that. And that's the thing. I think so many times as parents, we worry so much that we're going to make a mistake, so we overcompensate.
Right.
I think for my daughter, I've made lots of mistakes. I continue to make mistakes. But I'm not afraid to ask for forgiveness, and I'm not afraid to own those mistakes. And the lessons that I've taught my daughter is don't be afraid to live life for fear you're going to make mistakes. Don't
Mhm.
think that everything has to be done perfectly. She and I both love Maya Angelou's quote that people won't always remember what you said or what you look like, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And for me, as a mom, I wanted my daughter to always know she was loved. And that's something I can say, Andre, despite all that happened in my life. And this gets me emotional.
Mhm.
Everything that happened in my life, I know unequivocally that I was so very loved by my mom and dad. So despite the challenges that they each had with how they lived life and how they responded or reacted to things, I did always feel loved. Always. Always. And that's something that for my daughter, I that's something she can't always control what happens around her, but she can control how others who are around her feel.
And,
How are they left feeling?
and you have a daughter now.
Mhm.
What's two things that she, no, let's give you an even number. Three things that she shared with you that you look back and go, wow, that happened to me. And you have to address it with her.
So the first was one time she brought me some very poorly written paper. And I remember she goes, "Look, mommy, look what I did." And I read it and I go, "Anna, this is not your best work." To this day, she remembers that.
Really?
She remembers me saying that, and she remembers just being totally deflated. Well, my intent was, "Anna, you can do better than this. This is not your best work."
Right.
I think I was probably distracted at the time,
Right.
and I could have said that in a different way
Right.
because, yes, she still remembers that.
Mhm.
The other thing is, I remember one time that she was saying something negative about a child that didn't get a Barbie that she got for Christmas.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to instill loving kindness in my daughter. And so I said, "Oh, so why are you talking bad about a little girl that didn't get a Barbie doll?" She goes, "Well, because I got one." And I said, "I tell you what, why don't you go get that Barbie and let's go wrap it up and let's go take it to that little girl who didn't get one. Because
Mm.
we don't know what's happening in her life, Anna. You have lots of Barbies. Let's go bring some joy to her life."
Mm.
And, I remember that, that and my daughter, remembers that. She may not remember the specific details, but she remembers that I've talked to her about loving kindness.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing is about respect. I never really spanked my daughter, but I could sure squeeze her arm if she misbehaved. And I remember we've traveled a lot. We've been very fortunate. I really wanted my daughter to see the world. That was really important for her to understand different cultures
Mhm.
and to know that everyone is not the same and to be able to respect diversity. And so, I mean, growing up in Bermuda, her papa was black. I mean,
Right.
she never thought anything about the fact of calling this man who was a black Bermudian her papa,
Right. Right.
but my daughter has seen the flip side of that. She has seen, about discrimination and really speaks out and tries to create change around that. But I remember we were in Hawaii and I had bought her a pair of glasses and I had said to her, "Anna, you need to be sure that you hold on to these glasses." And she left them on the plane and I remember her saying something like, "Oh, you can just buy me another pair." Uh, no, ma'am, I will not buy you another pair. What are you going to do to earn this? And later in the day, she was still being snarly with me. And I remember I kind of squeezed her arm, and that's all it took. Calmed her down.
Right.
So I think she still remembers those arm squeezes. But I think, I know that that's 3 there, but I think out of all of these, it's
Right.
about kindness, that kindness goes a long way, that your looks will fade, jobs are lost, jobs are gained, um, you know, test or exams you take or, you get great grades or not so great grades. But the thing that no one can ever take away from you is kindness. And
Mm.
and I know that may sound very kind of cheesy in a way, but it's how we have both lived our life. Just be kind.
What are you doing now before we wrap up? I know you're guiding people, you're helping people, you got a new business. Tell us a little bit about that and how the viewers can reach out to you.
Mhm. So I do have a consulting business, Dryden Holland Consulting, but as part of that business, I'm really excited about a new venture that we're doing called Immersion Intensives. I'm working with Jim Phillips, who was a very successful businessman, had this vision about creating a different level of care that was when people needed more than an individual, but didn't really need an IOP, intensive outpatient or partial hospitalization or residential treatment. And what we've done is we've created these intensives that are anywhere from 3 to 10 days, and what's really unique about the model is we don't have a "we build it, now let's get people to come" model. We
Mhm.
have a model of you tell us what you need and we will build it around your needs. So
Wow.
therefore, it's not brick and mortar. We're able to go anywhere in the country. The other thing that's very unique is it's a blended model. We believe in bringing the power of nature and excursions and body movement.
Mhm.
And so we combine doing outdoor excursions with best practice clinical work. We also use expressive therapies, art, body movement, breath work. And then the other part that, of course, is right up my alley as an eating disorder therapist is we bring in a chef and we really focus on the importance of nutrition and how, food is not only for the body, it's for the mind, but it can also be for enjoyment.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes in our world we have forgotten the importance of that. We focus a lot on water and the need to drink all this water,
Right.
but we don't always focus on the value of food. And, we said this earlier, to be able to enjoy food. It's
Yeah.
almost like that is a taboo. I'm like, we could learn a lot from the Italians. Yeah, we could learn a lot from the Italians because food is to be enjoyed.
Is there a
So,
phone number or a website they can go to?
yes,
You never,
yes.
and they
So
also need to realize that this service is offered no matter where you're at.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly
Is there a
right.
number or something they can reach out to you
Yes.
guys?
The phone number is 615-345-9514, and the website is Immersion Intensives. Now that's Immersion, Emersion Intensives, and that's very symbolic. Immersion means coming out of, like
Okay.
you emerge out of water. So many people think we're saying immersion, which is going down into, but
Right.
our goal is to bring people out of the dark places they're in. So I'm very, very excited about it. I think it's a wonderful model.
Leave the viewers with something so positive, because this whole interview has been nothing but positive, delightful. Um, my hats off to you for bringing a topic that we haven't had in the last 4 seasons. That's the beauty of wanting to be a mother. Leave the viewers with
Mhm.
something positive before we wrap up today's show.
Never give up hope. I'm working with a client right now who is in her 40s who believes that, having a family is something she would never have. And I said, "Well, why can't you? Of course you can still have a family. It
Right.
may mean you have to adopt or foster, but look at the children out there who really need love." What I would say to people that in our darkest times, and believe me, I've been there, to find that one thing that can get you through that day, one thing, and hold on to that one thing until you have something bigger. It does
La-
get better. It really does.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.